Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Yale School of Management Senior Associate Dean for Leadership Studies, Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, and his panelists, Her Excellency Hala Al-Ansari, Reem Fauzi, Dina Powell, and Ambassador Josette Sheeran.
Well, thank you, all of you. Unlike Tom, I'm not giving away tickets to all of you for staying, although this is a panel that, with this fantastic galaxy of stars that we've had since last night, and great panels. I know this is a panel that everybody's been waiting for, not because it's the moderator either, but it is for two other reasons, which has to do with the stars on this panel itself, but also the topic has come up in every single session. Not every session had the demography of this particular panel, and yet the centrality of broadening our reach was so critical. That building a brighter future for the region, of course, requires contributions of everybody. We don't want to leave out half of society. Although current unemployment rates are very high across the board, they're disproportionately skewed against women and youth. Christine Lagarde gave us some especially distressing numbers this morning. A prosperous region is going to need to incorporate its women into the workforce, and Tony Alamenu talked about this in great depth this morning, and workforce training required to succeed as entrepreneurs and business people. This shift will require a comprehensive strategy that's integrating marginalized populations. In particular, we're going to be taking a look at women on this panel. Now, I should also point out that the half a dozen Yaleys in the room know this is the 150th anniversary this year of women at Yale and the 50th anniversary of women at Yale College, so we're just slowly catching up back home. But somebody that a few of you know, Joanne Lippman, the author of best-selling What She Said book. She is, of course, a former editor-in-chief of USA Today and the deputy managing editor of the Wall Street Journal, said that 3/4 of men, in the research they've done, say that their support for gender equality is undermined by fears, largely loss of status and the disapproval of other men. That's back west. So as we take that around to other parts of the world, we realize that it gets even more complicated. Coincidentally, just for us today, last night you may have seen that BBC came out with a report, actually done by Princeton, but BBC branded it, taking a look at Gulf Coast countries. And what they said, looking at these 10 countries with a massive database, is that 9 of the 10 countries were overwhelmingly in favor of the possibilities for a woman to be head of state as president or prime minister. And that seemed pretty encouraging. The new regional economic plans we talked about, of course, last night and throughout today, is for taking a comprehensive, systematic approach for all the critical framework building blocks we need. But people kept saying, however, when we get to women, what's the challenge? If 57% of STEM majors in the Gulf Coast, in our states, are women, then we have this big drop in employment. How are we going to resolve that problem? Well, we have the experts here to do it. We have Her Excellency Hala Al-Ansari with us, Secretary General, Supreme Council for Women of Bahrain in its 4th and 5th terms, Executive Board member of the Arab Women's Organization since 2010, I believe, and member of the National Committee responsible for the implementation of the recommendations of the Bahrain Independent Commission of Inquiry, the BICI, awarded the Order of Merit for Pioneers in National Work in 2011 by His Majesty the King. We have Reem Fauzi, CEO of Rima Tours Group and Pink Taxis, and a graduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women's Program, and all kinds of exciting milestones along the way that we want to talk about. And Dina Powell, who is, of course, a Managing Director and Management Committee, a member of Goldman Sachs, a pretty serious investment banker in charge of environmental and impact investing, and president of the Goldman Sachs Foundation. Of course, took a tour of duty at several times in the U.S. government as U.S. Deputy Director of National Security and Assistant Secretary of State. and I'm about pretty much everybody's short list for any job that ever comes open. She keeps saying no, and everybody at Goldman is thrilled. Ambassador Josette Sheeran, President and CEO of the Asia Society, Vice Chair of the World Economic Forum, and raised about $10 billion to attack African hunger along the way, and Executive Director of the UN Food Program. And in fact, a great beneficiary of one of the youngest directors of the Office of Personnel in the White House, right, that helped launch your government career.
She did not need any help from me.
Many great connections around this panel. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because not only is this panel expert on gender, but everything else in this report that also has to be addressed that we can't get to in a day and a half, such as innovation, public-private partnerships, governance, and even cancer. Yes, seriously, we're going to address it all on this panel. This is one-stop shopping, and I'm somehow going to figure out how to do it, as I'm advised from a couple of my panelists, to speak as quickly as Jared managed to do last night, but to enunciate as well as he did as well, because they understood him, and they get every third word that I say. But Dina, could we start with you? Given the educational levels of women in this region, and then the big gap on employment, it's a shame we see that workforce drop off. Of course, the 10,000 Women Initiative and its extraordinary expansion, both through online and partnerships and things, has addressed this so effectively. It's nice to start with the good news example. Could you give us some of the background on how that's transpired?
Yeah. Sure. Well, thank you, Jeff. It's really a delight for me to be here today and to see so many people in this room eager to do everything they can to build opportunities for so many people in the region of my birth. And I'm extremely proud of what Jared and Jason and Secretary Mnuchin have pulled together after quite a lot of work that I witnessed personally. You know, it's interesting, when we first started working on 10,000 Women over 12 years ago, there was a lot of talk about the fact that women's empowerment was so critical. But it was really talked about as a human rights issue, which it is, and a justice issue, which it is. But over the years, the data is now so conclusive that when you economically empower women in developed and developing nations, you immediately it leads to poverty alleviation. It leads to healthier, more educated societies. It leads to increasing income inclusivity. And so it's just the case has been made now that this is not just those issues, this is smart economics. And over 12 years and working with tens of thousands of female entrepreneurs, we see that they don't allow barriers that exist even in the toughest countries to stifle their ambition or their results. Reem is a perfect example, but we've over all this time tracked the results. 80% of the women increase their revenue, 60% create new jobs, and 90% take their income and reinvest it in some way in community. And what's so interesting to see is that this is the greatest asset that I think we have. If you look at Jared's plan, the reason human capital is so central is because we're talking about a set of countries where 60% of the population is under the age of 30. And that means there is so much hope and opportunity, but we can't leave 50% of that talent behind. And I think that that's one of the reasons 10,000 Women has been successful. It's provided education, it's provided capital and support. But I also will just say that this is also a place where you really have successful models of public and private collaboration.
Right.
We've worked, of course, with the World Bank through our efforts, but 2 years ago, Ivanka, Chancellor Merkel, Christine Lagarde, and others launched what is now a $2.6 billion fund to provide capital to female SME owners in developing countries around the world. Many of the donors are from this region. So you're actually seeing progress, not only in private sector programs, one by one, but really this notion that the private sector is able to test models, to use riskier capital, develop some of these programs, and multilateral institutions and governments can scale them. So I'm really hopeful that this will be a central pillar as we move forward for this particular economic development plan.
I love the way you framed that, because in this space, it's so unusual that things get disappointingly territorial in areas where people are trying to do well. I ran an initiative. I was just a facilitator for it, called National Dialogue on Cancer. All the major cancer fighting organizations were battling each other rather than work collaboratively. This would be a perfect toss to Josette to take a look, as you mentioned, the UN. However, we've known each other a long time, right? And you fundamentally trust me like family. You did send me a private note last night, which, do you mind if I read it? It's just, I think she might, so I'm not going to look at her. It's to be tired of the old, it can't be done, ready for a vision to live forward. 10,000 Women was our ultimate case study in economically empowering women in countries that had extreme barriers but could not stifle their hope and vision and results. We had too much data from thousands of women that made the case. Okay if I read that, by the way?
Sure.
That was strong, but what's strong also, though, that's different is that the partnership approach. You also partnered with universities. Like in China, I think you were partnered with 4 universities. In India. Who are you partnering as you...
We really felt that it was important that we didn't show up and say, you know, we're Goldman Sachs, let us figure out what you need. We really felt that it was important to have local partnerships and incredibly respected academic institutions like the American University in Cairo or Tsinghua University or the Pan-African University in Nigeria. But what was important is that they didn't usually serve a certain sector of the population. They tended to have the elites attend their institutions. And instead, this was really about how do you go and find the entrepreneurs, the small and medium-sized enterprise owners who just need a little bit of support, business education, capital, provided in a way that's really accessible. And so we felt it was much more important to do that. And I think, you know, that quote, I sent you that note last night because, you know,
that private note
that was off the record, that, you know, was more about what is different about women.
Right.
You know, with all due respect, women aren't waiting for men to find solutions to these intractable problems. They're moving forward to do everything they can to provide a better life for their families.
It's fantastic. And you mentioned knowing the region, and as you mentioned Cairo, if there's anybody in the room that doesn't know your history, that in fact, that's of course where you were born. And in fact, 10 days ago, a couple of years ago, was your birthday, I think, right? So happy birthday belatedly. Josette, as a diplomat, major agency chief, a critical pillar of your success has been triggering innovative solutions to seemingly insoluble problems. Again, if we were private and not here in a public forum, I would just talk about what you did in Haiti that towered over the despair that was handed to you by a predecessor, but that would not be proper to do. But the UN Food Program required massive collaboration. So as Dina was talking about public-private partnerships, you did that in tremendous magnitude. They're attracting $10 billion to address hunger problems in Africa. The UN World Food Program reaches 100 countries under you and 100 million beneficiaries. What are some of the lessons on public-private partnership that you would turn to?
Well, thank you. And I'm so excited to be here. My first trip to Gaza was in 1994. I was working for 2 amazing people, Jeane Kirkpatrick and Jack Kemp. And we were looking at special economic zones and trying to bring those to the Palestinian territories. And what we learned in Harlem, when you green line areas so investment can come in, what was lacking was the public part of a private partnership. And you can't do anything without that enabling environment that allows you to come in and provides the air cover for the entrepreneurial investment and momentum. So this plan, which is really a 360-degree plan, that Jared presented last night is the first of its kind, and I think it can lift all these efforts that people have been trying to implement for so long. I was just in the West Bank last week. I brought
Congratulations on doing the homework for us.
Yeah. This was planned before I knew about this, but I brought a delegation of business leaders from literally every continent on earth to go and meet with Startup Nation in Israel and look at potential connections to creating opportunities in the West Bank. And so we met with government officials, business leaders, journalists in the West Bank, but also with young people. And what struck me in '94, and what struck me again, and every time I go back, which I do every couple of years, is the Palestinian people are so entrepreneurial. You feel the engine of wanting opportunity there. They're addicted to education. It's one of the most educated populations in the Arabic-speaking world. And the women I met there are ready to take over the world. I was with one company that's been very successful there, and half the top management team are women. And when I asked them what barriers they're facing, they were just kind of like, if there were barriers, we don't know where they are anymore, because they're just moving ahead to really seize control of their opportunity and their life. What is clear is that has to scale exponentially. And I'm thinking, when I first went to Gaza in '94, the women I met with, I did a roundtable at the Women's University there, they were hungry for opportunity. It's 25 years later, their lives passed, and that opportunity never came. And so how can we make sure we don't lose another generation that's ready to participate? And so we talked about things that are in this plan. I love that it has a technology part, because all that back shop technology work, a lot of these things don't require dealing with all these huge barriers. I will just say, you know, the US, one of my favorite charts I ever participated in was in the 1990s, about 200 different regulations governing a hamburger in the US, and they conflicted. And this mess that government can sometimes create, or systems, if you go to the West Bank or Gaza, it's extremely complicated regulatory environment. And so the one thing I do want to pivot to is one of the greatest public-private partnerships I ever participated in was when I was Deputy US Trade Representative in 2004.
QIZs?
Yes,
Yeah.
and so we launched with Egypt a qualified industrial zone, and with Israel that linked onto the free trade agreement with Israel. Now, all this did is create the opportunity and the requirement that Egypt and Israel work together on inputs, that all of these come through tariff-free into the US through the free trade agreement, so Egypt hooked on to that free trade agreement. Today, it's $1 billion a year in exports. It's 30% of Egypt's exports to the world are in the QIZs, and 150,000 people employed, 70% about are women. These are textile producing with Calvin Klein, with Old Navy, with the top brands in the world. And what I love is you see these delegations of Egyptian and Israeli business people going out and co-selling opportunity in the world. So can we imagine linking on those kind of big incentive programs?
14 years later,
Yes.
70% women. Could you run past the other statistics in case anybody didn't catch them?
So 30% of Egypt's exports come out of the QIZs.
Incredible.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And it's $1 billion a year. And that's a big, huge contribution to that economy. Jordan also has QIZs, and the free trade agreement with Jordan, took advantage of that even at bigger scale. And so you see, the opportunity there for women. What we've learned in the QIZs is that women sometimes need special attention for certain things. And so in Jordan, they found they need childcare, they need transportation, they need a meal at work, or else they cannot, there's not the social support structures. And so when those opportunities are there, this can really change their lives and their incomes. You look at Gaza, where the average income is $800 a year. You look at China textile production, where the average income is $600 a month. You can see that there can be competitive opportunity here to do high-quality textile production with that incredible Egyptian cotton. Is it better anywhere in the world? And to really make this, it already is a garment center of the world, but to provide so much opportunity. But you need the kind of air cover and airlift that we're seeing in this plan, I think, to power up these ideas in a huge way. Can I just mention one last thing? Certainly. With the World Food Program, we were one of the biggest aid programs in the West Bank and Gaza. All the non-refugee aid came through us for food. And we changed our motto, instead of feeding the world, to helping the world feed itself. And I made one change in Hebron. It was our kind of incubator. Instead of bringing in food from the outside, to create a credit card for food with Jordanian technologists, where people go to a local store and get eggs or yogurt or pita or tea or sugar. They could get 9 food items. This increased the dairy industry around Hebron 30% by the second year, because it was all local purchase. And today, about 25% of food aids local purchase, which powers up the economy and powers up women to make these choices. So even with the aid structures, I think they can be rechanneled to help people help themselves, and we can have a lot of innovation in that space that we saw great success with.
Well, that's a lot of different pieces of that puzzle, or to untangle in that garments, as you referred to garment manufacturing. In Bangladesh, where there was zero garment manufacturing in 1980, it's now 75% of their export, and it's led to a huge change in the role of women in an Islamic country, and it's a great model that it's delayed marriage, so young girls have stayed in school longer as a result, and it's different than the impact on men in the developing world. We could talk about that perhaps on some other panel some other day, but the role of employment ties into what Christine Lagarde was telling us, that we need the education, but some of the big breakthroughs in development economic research these days are reminding us that it's not just a supply side issue. People in my line of work, you can never have too much education. We're always pushing that. But in fact, the job creation, as Christine Lagarde was reminding us, is so important to match that, and that's what's so great about this. And what you did with 10,000 Women, though, is matching it with resources, financial access to capital. In addition to the training, we love the partnerships with universities. Now, you didn't need to do any field research in this part of the world. You already seem to be up and running and a beneficiary of this program.
Yes.
How did 10,000 Women, and you don't have to do a testimonial,
No.
It's not been scripted, how did 10,000 Women affect your life as an entrepreneur?
I will tell you in numbers. Before the program, I have only 20 persons working for me as an employee. After the program, now I take this program in 2011, after the revolution. We have collapse in every business in Egypt, especially my field. I am in the field of tourism. Tourism industry is scientific for any revolution, any unsafety. And now in 2018, I have 450 employees in my company, and I train 1,000 Egyptian women to be a professional driver.
1,000 Egyptian women as drivers, and that's just in the pink taxi
Yes,
business.
this is in Pink Taxi.
And that was the epiphany you had through this program, that after the 2011
Yes.
revolution, you had to retrofit and redefine your strategic context in your business.
Yes, I learn a lot from this program. I learn how to make a business plan, how to see the market needs. Pink Taxi is coming from the market needs. It's learned me not working only with the foreigner, it's work to the Egyptian market. So I see that the market need is a safety way of transportation. So I launched the Pink Taxi. Pink Taxi is the first taxi company in the region that it's the driver are women and also the customer are women.
Drivers are women and the customers are women, which is pretty remarkable.
Just wait, Uber's going to buy her.
Well, this is a question. You started, originally you were an accountant and then general manager of a mid-sized travel agency, but you took a big leap in 2000,
Yes.
all on your own, to start your own travel-related business.
Yes.
Actually, a taxi business, then a travel business in 2005 or so. Then 2007, the tour business, all in your own.
Yes.
And it was 2011, right, with the revolution that you wound up scaling it back.
Yes.
Because it was forced on you. So you were moving with the times, but you had to be recruiting women to become drivers. Before it was easy to do that. Did you see much, just between we friends here, much resistance from the husbands and men in the lives of some of those women drivers you were recruiting?
I will tell you something. When I first announced that I want some women to be a professional driver, and I will give them all the training courses, and I will make for them a professional license, I will make everything for them. I couldn't find any woman to work as a driver because it's strange in Egypt and in the region to find a woman driver, a professional woman driver carrying some passenger in the car and go to work. First, I think that I must change the society mind to respect this job, this kind of job. Also, I search about what they need to work as a professional driver. They need a high salary. I give them a high salary. I give them a training course to how to face some problem during her driving, like if someone make harassment to her or something. I give them a lot of training course how to deal with the clients. I give them how to some information about the traffic law, about the maintenance in for the car, not to stop in any road. Also, I give them field safety. I run them after with the application through GPS, so I can control all their ways and know how they move. So this is make them feel safety, earn a lot of money to if they work as a professional driver. So I have a lot of drivers come to enter the courses and
So that would overcome the resistance, but both the passengers and the drivers then are women. But then in your core taxi business, you'll have also men or women drivers
Yes.
and men or women passengers with all possible
Yes.
combinations, but that's more driven towards
Yeah.
tourist
Yes.
customers, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
And that's also, as you were letting the secret out, you're setting these up on an Uber model, basically, so
Yes.
that you have a dispatch software that's similar to an Uber. I don't know if you're doing surge pricing models or you're much more fair about your pricing, but are you thinking of taking this?
If you have a stronger competitors like Uber and like Careem in Egypt, you must make something to be different. The something is that you have a women driver, so your application is only for a woman, and also you're not making a search or something for raising the money. We are more cheaper than...
Well, she's competing against Uber. She's not selling out just yet. How many people think she should take this model to Saudi Arabia? She thinks she should.
Saudi Arabia is
Are
a
you
good
going to?
opportunity, yes. It's a good market because they allow women to work as a driver in Saudi Arabia. So we have a lot of investors come to have a franchise like Bing Taxi in Saudi Arabia.
So when can we invest?
Welcome, anyone.
What's been the impact on women's lives, the customers, in terms of women's employment because of the freedom of movement? Have you seen anything? And generationally, you're seeing a change in family life, and I don't know if the mobility affects it. You got married at 19, May?
Yes, I
And
get
your
married
kids
in
are
19 years
19.
old.
And you have a sister,
I have five sisters and a brother, yes.
and they're waiting until like 28, 29, right? They're young. So are you seeing a change?
Yes, of course. It's a new generation. My sister now, she is married on 29, so she can feel and she can know what is marriage. Now I have only 2 sons, so the generation is different in Egypt. Now we have 8 woman ministry in the government. We change. Egypt is a change. We have 187 in the parliament, women in the parliament. So it's a change. Egypt changed.
That's a big change. The fertility rate has gone down. The employment is, the Gaza fertility rate, of course, is extremely high, perhaps twice that of what it is here. But we heard those statistics. That doesn't compare to what we have right here in Bahrain, right? We have, if we can think of it as Ms. Asnani, we have 49% of public sector.
Call me Hala.
Hana?
Hala.
Okay.
Much easier than.
Your Excellency, Hana.
Without Your Excellency, please.
But we have, I didn't refer to you as Madam Secretary either, so I'm really in trouble, is 49% of the public sector jobs are women. 35% of private sector jobs here in Bahrain are women. 57% of lawyers, are women. 68, 69% of physicians are women, 75% of educators. A lot's been happening here. How did this happen? Did the Supreme Council have anything to do with this, or these are independent events?
Good question. We're talking about a well-established society. Women movements started quite early. Education started 100 years ago. Bahraini men encourage females to study abroad. So we have so many social norms that made it easier for a national machinery to come and build on whatever was already established. So we always at the Supreme Council for Women make it a point that we are here to progress with women's status rather than creating the wheel. Supreme Council for Women was established back in 2001. It is considered as an advisory board for His Majesty on all women issues. From the early start, I will call it SCW to make it easier for me and for you guys. SCW from the beginning was keen to figure out the gaps. And when we talk about the gaps here in Bahrain, we are very much open to talk about it and create an environment of accountability. Because I think without a proper execution for any good plan, I don't think we're going to reach anywhere. We worked on ownership of such a plan. We worked on partnership, like you have just mentioned. And it should come from women as individuals, in addition to men's support. So when you speak about public-private partnership, we would love to see non-governmental organizations getting into this relationship and not isolate them from this exercise. Because we believe that grassroots do have a better approach than a national machinery or a public body in order to cascade certain beliefs, because any plan won't be able to find the right environment without having everybody sit on the same table and create the right mechanism in order to evaluate progress. So this is one of the things that here in Bahrain we try to focus on in order to report back with what happened so far after executing such a plan.
Well, that accountability and transparency is pretty remarkable. Is there anything sensitive in family life that the Supreme Council has gotten involved in that is noteworthy and different? Perhaps I think there was a joint family law in 2017 and some issues wrestling with alimony, divorce issues, some of the most difficult domestic life issues that the Council has taken on. Any insights into that?
Yeah, the Supreme Council, the SCW, when we have finalized the initial draft of the manuscript or the plan, there were three main pillars that we have focused on in the beginning in order to be humble about how we proceed with women empowerment issues. So number one was social stability, right. In addition to economic empowerment, leading the way to political participation. So it all started at home, making sure that the main rights of women are reflected in our legislations. So we went through this tedious exercise in order to bridge any gaps in legislations itself, and one of those gaps was family law. So that law helped a lot, in addition to what you have just mentioned, the alimony fund, looking into certain services that are provided to women here in the country that required a little bit of uplifting in order to reach out to their needs, et cetera, et cetera. So we are trying to do a mix of so many things. Prototypes is another challenge that we face.
Some that'll be more country specific, as we talked about, and some that are a great model for across the region. It's whether or not it's the Arab Organization of Women or other ways that Tom Barrack was talking an hour ago about heroic models. Well, we certainly have heroines right here. If there's some way that we can just share these models elsewhere, and let me take us to a final comment question right now. In fact, whether or not it's sharing these models or other thoughts that you have on how we can take some of these lessons and bring them into this economic peace through prosperity plan. Are there thoughts other than creating more jobs? You know, you've looked at small business initiatives, 10,000 small businesses, and a lot of the problems there in startups was that the founder also has to be chief marketing officer and chief financial officer and HR guru and general counsel and everything else, and the broad gauging of skills that you've been building. And I don't know if there's anything that any of you would like to add as suggestions as we close.
You know, Jeff, I really think we're going to look back on this conference as the beginning of a huge opportunity for this region. And I think that women are going to be central to that. I think obviously there's so many challenges, and if this were easy, we would have already seen a major solution to these problems. But the truth is, there's just too many young people, too many young men and women counting on their leaders to really show a path for a more bright future. And I have to say, if you look back in history, women have been central to most of the successful efforts in peace. So I couldn't be more proud of Your Excellency and Reem and others who are on the ground fighting every day for that brighter future.
Being on the frontiers of change, congratulations to you on that. Josette, did you have some thoughts and suggestions?
So I was really pleased last night that Jared's presentation really honed in on what I think is common to all humanity, which is everyone wants to better the lives of themselves and their families. And what we've seen, what I've seen time and time again, is how opportunity can trump ideology, it can trump hatred. And even in Pakistan, for example, we fought so hard to keep young girls in school, and then we decided just to create the incentive of giving a bag of rice at the end of the month if a girl had perfect attendance. That did it. There was no debate, because a family saw this would better the lives of their family. And if that continued from 12 years old to 16 years old, we had 50% attendance by girls in schools. And so these kinds of incentives are very powerful when people see this can make a better life for my family. The other thing I've been thinking about is how do we supercharge this and get early wins? And my friend Shlomi Fogel is somewhere. He's been doing amazing work in Israel to look at how you can create special economic zones that are demilitarized next to Gaza or the West Bank and provide employment opportunity, but also a legal environment where there can be arbitration and other solutions while we work on the infrastructure of governance, which will take some time. Imagine linking those to a QIZ formulation, which the US, Israel, and others. So I think there's ways to power up that hope with some quick wins, because we've seen these things be able to work throughout the region and throughout the world. So I would say, you know, really powering up the opportunity to create momentum with some quick wins that get over the barriers of all the things that have to be solved for long-term prosperity and success. And women will benefit from that because they're ready for the opportunity.
Very compelling institutional models on personal levels. Any final? I mean, you're donating 10% of your profits to the breast cancer patient. In fact, your mom sadly had succumbed to breast cancer, and what a tremendous cause. Is there anything on a personal level you'd want to add as a final recommendation or lessons?
Okay, I would like to tell you that what the woman needs in the region to be a businesswoman. They need practice to improve their skills.
Right.
This is first, not only the education. They need also to access to finance because they have a lot of problem to access to finance. The important thing they need supporting from the society, from their family, and also from the governmental, everything they need support. This is very important for them. But I would like to give them a positive message that the future is in the region. I agree with Mr. Labbar yesterday when he said that it is a potential. It is a very nice opportunity in the region, especially for women.
Oh, that's fantastic. Final thoughts?
As an Arab woman, I look highly at the Palestinian example when it comes to their efforts in order to empower their women with the limited resources that they have, and in light of the complicated situation they're living in day by day. We are not here to breach them on how they are going to execute any future plans, but I think it will make a difference to get the buy-in from them, communicate this plan in a way whereby they see themselves as leading the way for themselves and for their children. So I think this is a very important message to address the Palestinian women.
It is, and I think there's some very good recommendations with some very compelling personal testimonies of what you've all done heroically on this front. I should say that there's some humility required here, that in the West we have not exactly closed all the gaps on this front. As we opened with Joanne Lippman's book as a reference, I've been working in women's leadership issues for the last 30 years, studying them by default, because nobody at that time at the Harvard Business School, none of the women wanted to be stigmatized looking at these issues. So while I've been working on this front, is in today's New York Federal Reserve statement, the president of the Fed has a statement today, that just says John Williams is calling attention to the bias that's out there in today's papers and saying in a finance forum that it's a source of constant disappointment. It's 2% of venture capital in the U.S. Goes to women. We have a lot to do on this front elsewhere, and it's not just in this region, but the ideas that we have here can travel very far. The comprehensive nature of this plan is remarkable. There are elements of past initiatives that we all know about, but nothing has been this comprehensive. And to even wrestle with this issue has not been folded into any of the other kinds of plans in the past. But there's something else in addition. It's the infectious spirit that everybody in this room feels, and this panel so models, of that can-do spirit, that why say, it's the old broken record. Nobody's here saying can't be done. We admit that there are differences by country, there are differences in time frame, technology, sector, but it can be done. And
especially if women do it.
Especially if women do it. But there's another element too, and that's what you're modeling by letting me join your panel here. It's the element of trust that we have in this room, which is remarkable. There is a spirit not only of hope, but there's a spirit of trust that Thomas More once said just before he got beheaded, that as an advisor to King Henry VIII, that trust is as fragile as having a liquid cupped in your hands. Once you separate the fingers, it's forever gone. A wonderful thing as we began with the spirit of trust here, and I'm sure by the time Secretary Mnuchin winds down with us later today, that spirit of trust is only going to be fortified. Thank you so much for all of your efforts.
Thank you.
Great. Good job.
Jeff, thank you, Jeff.